Top of the morning to you. Welcome to our special coverage of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I'm Olumide Macaulay. The headlines: Crimean shipyard on fire, 2 ships damaged in Ukraine missile attack. President Putin welcomes North Korea's Kim to space rocket launch site as Kim supports Putin against the West. Plus, US-UK warn Russia against the DPRK arm purchases at Security Council meeting. Thank you for joining us. At least 24 people are injured after the Sevastopol shipyard on the Crimean Peninsula caught fire this morning and 2 ships are damaged. The Russian Defense Ministry reports this is as a result of Ukraine launching 10 missiles and 3 speedboat attacks on the port. 7 missiles were downed by Russia's air defense systems, and all 3 boats were destroyed by a patrol ship. The Moscow-installed governor of Sevastopol says all emergency services are working on the site. There is no danger to civilian objects in the city. The strategic shipyard on the peninsula, which Russia annexed from Ukraine in 2014, builds and repairs ships and submarines of the Russian Black Sea Fleet. The fleet has launched numerous drone and missile attacks on Ukraine. Ukraine almost never publicly claims responsibility for attacks inside Russia or on Russian-controlled territory in Ukraine, but has been saying in recent months that the destroying Russia's military infrastructure helps Kiev's counter-offensive. Russian President Vladimir Putin has welcomed North Korean leader Kim Jong-un to the Vostochny Cosmodrome, Russia's most modern space rocket launch site. In his words, "I'm glad to see you," he told Kim as he shook hands with North Korea's leader for around 40 seconds. "This is our new Cosmodrome." Via translator, Mr. Kim thanked Mr. Putin for the invitation and for the warmth of his reception. Meanwhile, responding to a question about whether he and Mr. Kim will discuss military matters, Mr. Putin said they will discuss all issues. Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu is also attending the talks. Russian media added that Mr. Putin showed Mr. Kim around the building where Russia's new space booster, the Angara, is assembled. The 42.7-meter rocket launches payloads into low Earth orbit. The Cosmodrome, where Mr. Kim arrived, is nestled amongst the forests of eastern Russia, not far from the Chinese border. Staying with the visit, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un told Kremlin chief Vladimir Putin that Russia is fighting a sacred war with the West and that the 2 countries will battle imperialism together. Speaking through a translator, he says, quote, "Russia has risen to a sacred fight to protect its sovereignty and security against the hegemonic forces. We will always support the decisions of President Putin and the Russian leadership, and we will be together in the fight against imperialism." And footage from Russia shows Kim Jong-un's sister Kim Yo-jong standing alongside him at the Cosmodrome Space Center in Russia. Kim Yo-jong can be seen looking over her brother's shoulder while he signs a guest book inside the Space Center. His message in slanting Korean script reads, "The glory of Russia, which gave birth to the first conquerors of space, will be immortal." Kim Jong-un, September the 13th, 2023. His sister, Kim Yo-jong, is one of the country's most important political figures and a key advisor to her brother. In 2021, she was promoted to the nation's top decision-making body, the State Affairs Commission, headed by her brother. Meanwhile, the United States has accused North Korea of providing arms to Russia, but it's unclear whether any deliveries have been made. Both Russia and North Korea have denied those claims, but promised to deepen defense cooperation. Russia, on its part, criticized the United States for supplying cluster munitions to Ukraine.
The decision of the U.S. to supply Ukraine with cluster munitions is unconscionable. In response to this, according to reports, the Biden administration is preparing a decision about supplying the Kiev regime with long-range missiles with cluster munitions. But the U.S. Investigative Committee has said that up to a third of these cluster munitions might not explode and they might remain in the ground as a threat for decades for civilians. And this is despite the fact that the unanimous opinion of military experts is that these munitions do not provide Ukraine with an advantage on the battlefield.
And North Korea leader Kim Jong-un arrived in Russia by private train for talks with President Vladimir Putin. UN Security Council members traded bombs on arms supplies to Ukraine.
This is the 5th meeting Russia has requested on this subject in 6 months. This latest request is yet a further signal, as though we needed it, of the depth of Russia's cynicism and willingness to waste the Security Council's time, attention, and resources. Russian officials seem to continue to think they can distract us from the Kremlin's actions undermining international peace and security, including through Russia's irresponsible nuclear rhetoric, through its ongoing efforts to unlawfully procure arms from the DPRK in violation of this very Council's resolutions. We will continue to identify, expose, and counter Russia's attempts to acquire military equipment from the DPRK or any other state that is prepared to support Russia's war against Ukraine. We urge the DPRK to cease its efforts to transfer arms to Russia. We also urge all member states to remind Russia of its Security Council obligations, remind Russia that any transfer of arms between the two countries would violate UN arms embargo on the DPRK that Russia itself has voted to adopt.
It appears that Moscow is attempting to seek foreign sources to replenish its military arsenals. We closely follow the current contacts between Russia and North Korea, which may focus, as reported, on the supply of North Korean weapons and munitions to Russia for the purpose of intensifying its war against Ukraine. We underline that if this is the case, this will constitute another grave violation by Russia of the Security Council decisions, as it has already happened with the supplies of military UAVs to Russia by Iran.
Elsewhere, Japanese Chief Cabinet Secretary Hirokazu Matsuno also has lodged a strong protest against North Korea following Pyongyang's latest missile launch. Matsuno told reporters both missiles fell in the sea outside Japan's exclusive economic zone and that Tokyo will respond in close cooperation with the international community. According to South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff and the Japanese Coast Guard, North Korea fired 2 ballistic missiles off its east coast just hours before leader Kim Jong-un was expected to meet President Vladimir Putin in Russia. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky has said that the world is not yet united enough in opposing Russian war atrocities committed in his country. Russia wants a policy of genocide to become the new normal, according to him, who was addressing Dutch students in The Hague by video.
First, the law on e-declaration. As soon as the voted law reached me from the parliament this morning, I vetoed it.
President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, meanwhile, he's been waiting for a new vote on a parliamentary bill after he vetoed the one that sought to seal off mandatory asset declarations by officials from public view. Parliament voted last week to restore a declaration suspended after Russia's 2022 invasion as a security precaution, but to keep the disclosures closed to the public for a year. Mr. Zelensky earlier in the day says Tuesday's veto was because declarations must be fully revealed and a decision on this will be made in September.
First, the law on e-declaration. As soon as the voted law reached me from the parliament this morning, I vetoed it. I am waiting for a new vote with a positive result regarding the immediate opening of the register of declarations. Such a decision should be made already in September.
We now speak with Nigeria's former ambassador to Switzerland and the United Nations in Geneva, Ambassador Joseph Ayalogu. Ambassador Ayalogo is speaking to us from London. Thank you for making out the time to be with us this morning.
Good morning, Olume. Good to see you again.
Same here, sir. Help us understand, why is the United States and the allies of Ukraine so miffed by this cooperation between North Korea and Russia, to the extent that they say that North Korea should not supply weapons to Russia? Is this a symbolic complaint, knowing that Russia will not listen?
Well, two things. Well, the first question is why they are miffed. Because they are miffed because North Korea has shown itself difficult to conform with general global rules on anything, really, especially on weapon acquisition, nuclear arsenals, and so on. So, and they have continued to build capacity to produce dangerous weapons, or at times weapons that you don't even know about, and have increased their capacity to deliver across continents. They pride themselves in it. They are not taking any instructions or buying into any rules. So that would normally be miffed to anybody, but especially to the U.S. or the NATO allies, because that means an infusion of a source of weaponry to Russia that you cannot control. That's one. Well, I don't think the complaint is symbolic. It's serious, but like you mentioned, it's not likely to be heeded.
Yes, indeed. It will not be heeded. They just supplied uranium-depleted munitions to Ukraine. They just supplied the cluster munitions, which the whole world was in uproar against, even their own allies, saying that this is not a humanitarian thing to do. The United States shouldn't be supplying cluster munitions, knowing that the Ukrainian people, though they are really desperate to get a victory, but at what cost? Does the end justify the means? Well,
your point is that the U.S. is doing about the same thing.
Yes.
Yeah, which is a good point too, but everybody would hopes that this war would even have stopped by now if certain parties conform with global rules on sovereignty and territoriality, so that the escalation of weaponry, especially dangerous weaponry, would stop or would not even have started in the first place. I don't want to hold brief for the U.S. Cluster and ammunitions are dangerous. I remember that there's this Ottawa Convention on landmines and so on, which at the time in Geneva we tried to make sure that it wasn't used. I mean, that it was wrapped up. Surprising that it will come into play again. But unfortunately, that is war, no, the side. With regard to delivery or use of very dangerous weaponry, none of the parties is right, and unfortunately, this war is not stopping; it's continuing. So once you have a war, you begin to look for weapons.
Ambassador, this is a question for the ages because it has defied any solution thus far. But how can peace be achieved where in countries such as Costa Rica and Central America, they have no standing army? Switzerland has no army. How will those countries be able to maneuver themselves in such a way as to remain sovereign, remain independent, and not have armies, while countries in Europe wouldn't dare such a proposition? Are there any lessons that one can learn?
Well, there are, but we don't seem to learn those lessons. Over the millennia, over the centuries, there have been wars. culminating in the wars of the 20th century and the decision of the international community, I would say, that they have to work to see the end of wars. And because wars undermine development and the enjoyment of humanity, which led to all sorts of efforts. The League of Nations failed, the United Nations failed. It was agreed and thought that if you establish rules, because rules guide human behaviors at the national, societal, community levels, why not at the global level? But if you set out rules, you will protect both the weak and the poor. That has been the trend in the 19th century. But we can see it being frustrated at every time. Unfortunately, the UN that was set up to deal with peace and security has a fault. You have a Security Council that some group, about 5 countries, claim the veto as a right. And they are the people who break most of these rules that have been set up about global peace. So, yes, when countries in the Costa Rica and the smaller countries, when they don't have a big power challenging their existence, fine. But Europe hasn't enjoyed that. This is what is happening in the Balkans and in the Black Sea region. You can imagine if it wasn't Russia that was borders Ukraine, and Ukraine would be doing their business, sorting out their internal matters. Nobody would want to put them down, but that hasn't been the case. So the main problem is world powers have to obey rules about global peace and security, and when they don't, then we have the tensions that we have, which is quite sad, because if they don't, then we don't have any way out.
At times, the G5 has been criticized to be called the Gang of Five. Do you think that the United States has undermined the effectiveness of the United Nations because of their pivotal role in the establishment of the body?
You mean the establishment of the Security Council with all those powers?
Yeah, yes.
Well, I don't know whether you would say it was a problem of the U.S. It's a problem of all the countries that make up the UN. Of course, we know that after the Second World War, there were the powers that were powerful, and to accommodate them probably, or to make them even accept the new trend of letting them not throw their weight all over the place, then you give them that power. But we have seen that veto power is not working. It's actually undermining peace. Because you can't call anybody to order. And of course, the UN doesn't have a standing capacity like a force to call anybody who infracts the rules, the global rules, to order. That's why you can't even get everybody to agree that the Soviet Union, Russia's invasion of Ukraine is an act that against global law and order. There are still, even though a lot of countries have accepted that is the case, but if you don't, and nobody's is really able to ask Putin to stop or get Putin to stop.
In whose interest was it, and what was your impression that the outcome of the G20 summit had a declaration and the language and the wording that did not condemn Russia's invasion of Ukraine? What does that portend?
Well, it's an expression again of what we've just spoken. The tendency that a big power can hold everybody to ransom. I'm sure that the team that gathered at the G20 wouldn't have had problem to say at least that Russia was out of line or is out of line in breaking the basic international rule of interfering in another country's sovereignty and territory. But because you're talking about the US, about Russia, and most people seem to want to pander to Russia or assuage his Putin's feelings. So they kept trimming down the declaration till it came out to something that, of course, it doesn't go far, doesn't go anywhere, doesn't solve any problem. It's the same problem that goes on. That's why we have difficulties dealing with very serious global challenges that have been emerging since the past 50 years or so.
Okay, thank you, Ambassador, for your time. But finally, before we go, we understand you were on a trip to Hungary. And yes, so love him or hate him, Viktor Orban, Hungary's leader, has been criticized, not unrelated to the length of his duration in power, but his position on certain European issues. In spite of that, I've heard a lot of the reports that Hungary is a very clean city, a very clean country, and a very efficiently run.
Yes, I can attest to that. I was there 30 years ago, first time. I helped to set up an embassy there. So going there again was just a nostalgic visit. And it's still well run, especially when you go out of Budapest, which I did. The Prime Minister Orban is still positioning himself as somebody who is not necessarily pro-Putin, but not against Putin. It hasn't helped him much, or the Hungary itself. I understand, because I did ask a few questions. Yeah. That is being punished. His country is being punished by the body of the EU body, that they don't seem to receive all that they could receive as being members of the EU. But you can see that also in the way certain structures are. They're not fully developed as the rest of the EU. But that is what they are. He's still popular with the people, and probably might be there for a few more years. So that was my experience in Hungary, and we're watching to see how the Prime Minister continues his relations with Putin vis-a-vis what the rest of the EU expect.
Indeed, at this point, it seems nothing will sway that neutral position that he seems to be cultivating. Thank you so much for your time and your insight this morning, Ambassador Joseph Ayalogu, Nigeria's former ambassador to Switzerland and United Nations in Geneva. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. Thank you.
After the break, Russian Su-24 military jets crashes in southern Russia during training. Details in a moment. Please stay with us. Welcome back. You are in the sophomore stretch of today's coverage of Russian invasion of Ukraine. A Russian Su-24 frontline bomber has crashed in the southern Volgograd region during a training flight. Now, Russian state-owned TASS news agency reported this, citing the defense ministry. According to the ministry, the plane was flying without ammunition and crashed in a deserted area. They did not provide further details about the incident, including the fate of the crew. During an air policing mission over the Baltics, Spanish and Italian Air Force pilots flew Eurofighters on Tuesday. The pilots set off from Lithuania at the Zoknia Air Base near Silesia and went through interception and patrol maneuvers. Detachments of Eurofighters from Italy and Spain took over NATO's Baltic Air Policing mission in August 2023, replacing Romania, Portugal, and the United Kingdom. At this point, we bring in public affairs analyst Mr. Oluseyi Adeyemo, who is speaking to us virtually from Lagos, Southwest Nigeria. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Olumide. Thank you so much for having me.
So let's pick up from where we left off just now with the report of the NATO countries' maneuvers as the war in Ukraine rages on. Again, NATO's position has been criticized by those who want peace, but NATO's position, it seems that they have no choice but to do what they're doing and support Ukraine to the hilt. But even as they do that, where does that leave efforts of peace?
Okay, I mean, the truth of the matter is, as far as I'm concerned, as a person, I would want to applaud the way NATO has handled this so far. You cannot but support Ukraine. And you then must be careful the way you go about it, because you also do not want to escalate this war. You need to manage it in a way that does not come across to Putin as he's being attacked. And everybody is wary of the way he will react if he perceives that he's being cowed in. And so, in my opinion, I believe that NATO has done a good job in the way they've managed the war, invasion, whatever name we want to call it so far, because they've been quite reasonable in the way they've managed it. They've supplied weapons in cases they're expected to. I know that the Ukrainians are not happy. They want more. They want them to do more. But truth is, I believe that it's important that we manage this, because we are actually dealing with a very, very delicate matter in our hands right now.
If this was a game of chess, internationally speaking, who'd be screaming checkmate at the end of the day, with the positioning of North Korea closer now to Russia? Is this trip of North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un to Russia, does it really portend of closer ties to come? Or is President Putin in a strategic masterclass trying to just take advantage of North Korea in this moment? Or does it speak of a larger foreign policy for the years ahead?
Again, I like the fact that you use the masterclass thing, because that's one thing I would always want us to, learn from all of this exercise. Truth of the matter is, Putin must show Russians that they are not ostracized, that they have allies, they have friends, they're not in this alone. And so whatever or whoever he can, show off, as it were, he would want to. Incidentally, the North Koreans, Kim has not really been very popular with everybody. He, in some way, also have been ostracized. And so this relationship is healthy for both of them, at least in the in the terms of being not regarded as being put in a cocoon. For them to show the rest of the world that they have allies as well. And beyond that, Putin obviously needs help, needs to get more weapons that I believe that Kim can offer him. And Kim also needs help because he's also having issues economically. So there's a need for him to also reach out. So for me, for both of them at this time, it's a very good relationship. And it's also good. For me, I'm also of the opinion that in some way, this relationship also helps to tell the rest of the world that we cannot have any country or any group being too powerful. There's a need for check and balance. And so if we are to look at this very well, I believe it's working for all of us. It's working for the superpowers, America, Europe. It's also working for them as well, because I believe that new allies are to be formed. There's a need for everybody to be put on check because, like you said, in law, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And so whether it's with the US or with Russia, we really do not want absolute power in any bloc or in any country.
That indeed is food for thought. Now, do you think the world is sitting on a keg of gunpowder with North Korea's nuclear arsenal and Russia's nuclear arsenal? and the fact that North Korea has made no bones about it, about threatening to use nuclear weapons with the United States to the effect. Remember when President Donald Trump was calling him Rocket Man, although he was insulting him. But do you think that there is a clear and present danger of a nuclear threat and in these times?
Incidentally, I'm one of those who are very optimistic about the fact that all of us all over the world, whether you're North Korean or an American or a Russian, we all like life. We would want to live. You know, we can do all the shakaras we can. You know, at the end of the day, we have our people to pander to. We have our people to rule. You'll be shocked. I mean, a friend of mine just got transferred to Russia recently. And the first thing that struck me is, under this condition, you're going to Russia. The truth is, they're living a life. They're getting things done. And things are happening. And so for me, it is part of the whole game to ensure that you show your strength. At the end of the day, they also know their limits. They know, I mean, nobody wants to commit suicide. And that's why no matter how recklessly you drive, if I sit beside you and you decide to be, I'll just switch off. Because if you want to die, you know, if I don't want to die, I'm sure you don't want to die as well. You know, so I'm not one who will worry so much about who is driving, because I believe that all of us want to live life. So in my opinion, all of them want to live life, and nobody wants to die right now. And that's why it's important that we take. I don't believe that the North Koreans will overstep their bound, or the Russians will overstep their bound, because the truth of the matter is, everybody at the end of the day wants to live a life.
Then who does one turn to? Now we understand that the United Nations is almost emasculated in this affair. No one talks about the United Nations with any sort of hope that they will bring a solution to this problem. People refer to Turkey, people refer to maybe China, obviously, as countries who have enough influence to bring this matter to a head that leads to a conclusion. What do you think?
For me, the development that have continued to happen has put all of us in this space. The truth of the matter is, everyone is becoming strong. Everyone is acquiring nuclear weapon. United Nations should also brace up, because truth of the matter is, nobody's going to hand anything over to anyone on the platter of gold, because we are all developing. We're becoming all stronger, and that's why, again, I want to, quickly caution Africa, because at the end of the day, nobody is going to come and hand you anything over on the platter of gold. If you don't want the rest of the world to continue to walk all over you, you also must raise up to the occasion, because this is the time everybody's doing things more seriously. Everybody's showing that they're developing and they're acquiring strength and all of that. So the UN is being seen as being not as powerful as they usually are, because things are different right now. You have individual countries, haven't become so strong that you just don't shout or back at them like they usually do. And so it is not that they're not playing their role, but the truth of the matter is, at the end of the day, these are the countries who contribute to their existence. And so in some way, there's some undercourt or behind the scene politics that goes on, and that's sometimes make them look like they're not as strong or as present as they ought to be. And so that's why the thing is, looks like that now.
So the war in Ukraine proper, winter almost upon us, and it's been said that it'll be a very hard proposition for the counteroffensive to continue. We've had analysts on the program say it may continue, not stop, but not at the velocity that it was at prior to this. Is there any hope in your mind that Ukraine will have some sort of decisive victory before the winter is fully upon that region?
Decisive victory, definitely not. Will they be able to hang on? Yes, they will. For me, Again, Zelensky has blown my mind beyond imagination. I love the way that he's handled corruption, has shown character, has shown that he's really determined to show the rest of the world that he's a true leader, one that is good, who understands his job and is able to do it very well. And so when you have such a leader, you are really not likely to be able to run over such people. And that's why, for me, he's been able to manage the rest of the world in engaging when he needs to shout at them or cry at them, beg them. He does it, appropriately and all of that. And when he also needs to quickly go back home and say to his people, we're not doing things right, we can do it better and all of that, he's been very, very good at his work, in my own opinion. But Russia is not a country that you win like that. They have an history, they're big, they're huge, they're strong, they're resilient. And so decisive victory, maybe not. I don't think that will happen, at least not in the nearest future. But that they will be able to hold on to this. And all of us, in the prayer room who have continued to pray that this will soon roll over and we have our lives together, would keep praying and hoping that in one way or the other, we would be able to get some agreement and reach some level of compromise so that everybody will shield their sword. Maybe they will all get tired on both sides and they'll be willing to talk, at least more than they're doing right now.
To the Black Sea grain deal, Mr. Adeyemo, some ships in that humanitarian corridor have been able to proceed out of that area under the shelter of Ukraine. Russia didn't attack those ships, although there's a report of at least one ship being attacked. But prior to this, is there a possibility that Russia is not even though it is in Ukraine's interest to portray Russia in bad light as much as possible, that they're not as bad as they're portrayed to be? Because since the expiration of the Black Sea grain deal, any ship in that area was fair game to Russia if it was had anything to do with Ukraine. But they haven't gone gung-ho to attack and destroy all the ships. They haven't gone close to the borders of Poland and Bulgaria to destroy all the ships within that corridor that Ukraine provided.
Olumide, all this noise that we're all making, UN, you, all of us, they are hearing, and they're human beings. And yes, in war, we like to cry foul, very loud. But like you rightly describe, the Russians are not animals, and they are not. They're not. Putin is a human being. He's got blood running through his veins, and he would, in some cases, look at certain things and sort of look at the other side to pretend as if he's not seeing them. Because if it becomes too difficult, everybody will feel it, and so it's like you're hitting somebody, you're fighting. Individual fight. There's a way you do it in a way that you don't want to come out as being weak, and you also don't want to come out as being too wicked. And so you manage it. At the end of the day, we're all human beings. As far as I'm concerned, by the grace of God, I have had opportunity to deal with a lot of people across the world. And I know that sometimes when we have perception of people, when we deal with them from far, it's different when you have a one-on-one with them. Some friends came in from across Africa last week, to an event that we had. And a lot of them had some very gory picture of how Nigeria is, how things are, very, very bad and all of that. But when they got here, it was difficult for them to return back home. So usually that's the way it is. And so I do not believe that the Russians would, outrightly want to take away the food of the world, because, it is being painted in that light that whatever comes out of Ukraine fates the world, particularly us, that is in the underdeveloped world. And so since they are also, looking at situations where they can do business with Africa, they've invited Africa to them. And of course, I'm sure they will not want to come across to Africa as that country or people that is denying them from having food to eat.
Indeed. We hope that this situation progressively gets better. And we thank you for your contribution and insight this morning, Mr. Adeshe Adeyemo, public affairs analyst who joined us from here in Lagos.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Mr. Adeshe Adeyemo. When we return, Pope's Ukraine peace envoy heads to China. Details in a moment. Please stay with us. Welcome to the final stretch of today's coverage of Russian invasion of Ukraine. The European Union will not renew sanctions against the 3 businesses targeted over Russia's war against Ukraine when the current punitive measures expire this week. The 3 men waiting to be delisted are Russian businessman Grigory Berezkin, billionaire Farhad Akhmedov, and the former head of Ozon of Russian e-commerce firm Alexander Shulgin. Russian military leader Georgy Shavayev, who died last year, will also be removed. According to sources who work on sanctions, the listings are considered legally weak, meaning the EU is not certain they will stand up in court if challenged. The EU Agriculture Commissioner says he believes the European Commission should extend a temporary ban on Ukraine imports into 5 neighboring EU states as the measures help boost exports outside the bloc. This is the main argument for prolonging the preventive measures and a strong position on the Commissioner's view. As a result, farmers in the neighboring states of Poland, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, and Slovakia have faced increased competition and bottlenecks in their own markets. Now, Russia has significantly raised its inflation forecast for the next 2 years. To help us make further sense of this information is Laddie Williams, Channel Television business correspondent. Laddie, good morning.
Good morning.
Why?
Yeah, so I guess they're not as optimistic as they were before. They were expecting about 5.3% for 2023. That's the inflation rate. But now they've increased that to about 7.5%, far away from their target of about 4%. So the issues are mounting. The macro issues, we're seeing, inflation, rising at this time. We're seeing the ruble also weaken. So we're seeing currency devaluations, a double whammy, and rising inflation. So at the end of the day, it's looking like rates are going to really go up at this time, because now we see the Monetary Policy Committee would have to, hike rates at the next meeting to try and tame inflation and also, control the value of the ruble. We know that the Russian central bank, they've had a lot of currency control measures that they put in place to try to, keep the ruble strong. But after breaching that 100 level, that's against the dollar, and later it strengthened. But touching that level was a reality reality check for them at this point, because it was a big drop for the ruble. And now, looking at their labor markets, is seeing unemployment at an all-time low, about 3%. Yeah. That's supposed to be a plus at this time, but at the end of the day, there's a serious labor shortage, and that's why we're seeing unemployment low. So at the end of the day, we're seeing, the economy ministry, they've put out their forecast. They're expecting to hit their target now at 2025 instead of 2024. That's in the inflation target. So at the end of the day, we know the sanctions are biting, and the macros are not looking so good in the short term.
In spite of this, is it that the core of Russia's economy is still strong? It's not as though the people are starving, they're hungry, they're complaining. There seem to be, does that further rubber stamp the resilience of the Russian economy?
Well, it shows the economy is quite, resilient. They're the biggest, producer of natural resources, in the world. So at the end of the day, they've been able to weather the storm, but still, in the longer term, analysts expect that the cracks will begin to show more, because they've been removed from the SWIFT network. They're having trouble settling payments, on the global scene. And they're also having their natural resources capped, like, oil. So all of this, plays into the resilience story. But at the end of the day, we still see the cracks there, even though some analysts believe that some of the data coming out of Russia at this point are not really what it is. But still, they have, been able to weather the storm. But it remains to be seen how they can push on in the long term.
Exporters who are doing business with Russia say they can get their trapped funds from India.
Right. So that's one of the impacts of the sanctions, because we've seen the great de-dollarization, with Russia. They've been trying to move away from the dollar now ever since they got, sanctioned by the US and the allies. So with cheap oil India is getting from Russia this time, a lot of those funds are trapped in India because it's in rupees. So now we're seeing the two top banks in Russia saying, you know what, we've improved ways to have a simple swap from rupee to ruble so that, you know, the manufacturers can get most of the trapped rupees in India, get it into Russia with the ruble. So they're using other friendly currencies to actually make this happen. They're also partnering with the UAE, you know, to see how they can, you know, get those funds converted, because at the end of the day, they are moving away from the US dollar. They do not want to, you know, take the US dollar at this time. But, you know, these are the risks with sanctions. At the end of the day, we know the US dollar is that global currency, and it is difficult, you know, moving away from that. So that's why we see them looking at how they can use cryptocurrency and central bank digital currencies to actually settle trade. So now the banks are saying, you know what, that's Burbank and SCB, they're saying, you know what, we're going to find ways to get that simple swap for rupee ruble so that manufacturers can get their funds out.
So the different values of the currency, does it affect their profit?
It definitely affects, you know, because at the end of the day, it's even affecting the revenue Russia is getting, because they're having to sell for cheap, you know, because of the sanctions. So they now have the issue of converting that, you know, to rupees, which is a major risk, you know, for Russia as a country, because where do you want to get settlements in rupees? So getting that straight swap is what they're looking for at this time. The top banks in Russia, we'll see how that works out. But at the end of the day, we know that when it comes to international trade, you do need that currency that everyone accepts.
Indeed, a rupee is not a dollar.
No, it's not. It's not at all. No.
Thank you, Laddie.
Thank you.
Laddie Williams, Channels Television business correspondent. Finally, on the program, Pope Francis, Ukraine peace envoy, is on his way to China as part of a mission that has already taken him to Kiev, Moscow, and Washington. The Vatican described Cardinal Matteo Zuppi's visit as an additional step in the mission for the Pope to support humanitarian initiatives and the search for paths that can bring about a just peace. The main aim of the mission is to help return Ukrainian children taken to Russia after the invasion. Mr. Zuppi will be in Beijing from Wednesday to Friday. He will be accompanied by an official from the Vatican's Secretariat of State. And that's it for today's coverage of Russian invasion of Ukraine. Thank you for watching. I'm Olumide Macaulay. Have a good day.